Hi, I'm Greg Lefebvre, and this is The Compulsive Storyteller, a series of short personal stories where we explore the idea that truth can be stranger than fiction. This week's story is entitled Peak Foliage. Have you ever been freezing cold? So cold that your teeth are chattering, your whole body is shaking uncontrollably, and even though you can't see it without a mirror, your lips have turned blue. This is how I find myself on an autumn trip with my old friend Ted. The two of us are off to see the brightly colored peak foliage in New Hampshire, departing from Waltham Studios, where Ted and I share a loft space in an old, early industrial building. We leave at the crack of dawn, Ted's idea, not mine, in his green Datsun 510 sedan, and head for Mount Cardigan in southern New Hampshire. We travel mostly on I-93. As we drive further north, the sun breaks through the early morning haze, lighting up the spectacular multicolored foliage on either side of the highway. The farther north we travel, the more vibrant the foliage becomes. All this bodes well for our planned trip up Mount Cardigan near Orange, New Hampshire, where there should be a great view of the peak foliage. We are in high spirits, both smiling like a couple of kids. Mount Cardigan is a little over 3,000 feet tall, not a grand peak, but an old, worn-down mountain that has a bald, smooth granite dome at its apex. We're planning to hike the ascending section of its moderately challenging loop trail, which should take about an hour and a half to climb, for us to reach an Appalachian Mountain Club cabin on the edge of the pine woods that rings the bald dome. As we park in the lot at the trailhead, the weather is perfect, a bracing autumn morning. Ted, who is always well equipped, is wearing a waterproof jacket with a hood and a bright orange vest because it is hunting season after all, along with a backpack containing many things including a drop cloth, a pup tent, and water. He also has on waterproof pants and sturdy hiking boots. As we leave the parking lot, he comments to me, "You know, you should have worn something a little more waterproof than a woolen hunting jacket." "Yeah, you're right, but the weather looks good, and the wool will keep me warm." Then he says, "Show me the bottom of one of your sneakers." I lift one foot to show him the underside of my old sneaker. The tread is completely worn away. Ted then jokes, "They're as smooth as the granite on the top of Mount Cardigan. Not the best choice for footwear." My response, "Sorry, Ted, but I'm not a professional hiker like you. But come on, let's get going. The mountain awaits." As we start up the trail, the air is filled with that wonderful fragrance of pine and moss, which is exhilarating. It's pretty easy going, but I have to keep looking down because, like most mountain trails, there are lots of roots and rocks to trip over. We catch a glimpse of a couple of white-tailed deer as they bound away through the trees, and a woodpecker is going at it, the sound of his pecking echoing throughout the forest. Up ahead, we can see the weathered AMC cabin in the distance, where we're going to stop a bit before we start up the mountain dome. Ted has it all planned out. We both comb the nearby woods looking for kindling to build a fire in the cast-iron pot-bellied stove inside. I'm not particularly cold because we've been hiking, but before the stove heats up the cabin, it is chilly inside. I'm happy that there's no one else here, and we use an old dented coffee pot to heat up some water to make coffee. And then with a smile, Ted produces a couple of small packets of sugar, the kind you find at a diner, which make the coffee almost delicious. Everything, even instant coffee, seems to taste better out in nature. After we clean up the cabin, Ted spreads out a topo map on the well-worn wooden table and outlines the route that he has planned for us. As we head out on our adventure, the sun disappears behind a thick bank of clouds that has moved in. Instantly, there's a real chill in the air. I realize that beside all the other mistakes I've made in equipping myself, I also didn't bring a pair of gloves. Ted, of course, has a pair of thick thermal ones. As we approach the vast, smooth granite field that is the dome of Mount Cardigan, the trees in the pine woods we're hiking through are more stunted, weathered, and even bone-like. It's now late afternoon, and Ted has planned for us to set up the tent so we can camp out in a depression, a sort of crease in the bald dome top, which offers some protection against the winds, which have picked up considerably since the clouds have moved in. Ted goes about setting up his pup tent, and as usual, he's a pro, and quickly erects the tent on top of a drop cloth as the speed of the wind increases. I'm just waiting around because he seems to have everything well in hand. At this point, the clouds settle downwards and become a cold fog that envelops the entire dome. Visibility drops to about a dozen feet in any direction. The light rain that is falling turns to sleet and glazes the smooth granite field that surrounds us with a thin, sheer ice, making any movement impossible. The wind is so strong that I have to sit down with my arms down and behind me, crab-like, to keep from being blown away. But the wind starts to propel me along the crease. As I try unsuccessfully to stop my movement with my bare hands, my fingernails scratch parallel lines into the ice. Then Ted grabs a hold of one of my arms and wrestles me into the tent, which is now flapping like a sailboat sail in a strong gust. Once inside, all the physical conditions that I've described at the beginning of this story set in. I'm so cold my teeth start to chatter, my whole body is shaking uncontrollably, and even my lips have turned blue. All I want to do is go to sleep. When someone freezes to death, their body goes through a series of stages that include shivering, which is the body's first attempt to generate heat, which can cause muscles to tense up, breathing to increase, and blood flow to rise. All good things. As body temperature drops, though, body functions begin to slow down. The heart's functionality deteriorates, and the lungs become congested with fluid due to poor blood circulation. Most people become unconscious at this point. When the body temperature falls below 85 degrees Fahrenheit, the cerebrum stops working, breathing ceases, the heart stops, and death ensues. To avoid all this, Ted covers me with his second sleeping bag, takes off his gloves, and vigorously rubs my hands. Every part of my body is so cold that I just want to go to sleep, but he tries to keep me awake by sitting me upright, shaking me, and then sharply ordering, "Wake up! Wake up!" He continues this relentless routine throughout the night. By now, it's getting light outside of the tent, and Ted's valiant efforts have succeeded. I am still alive. The wind dies down, clouds lift, exposing the blue sky above, and then miraculously, the sun breaks through. It quickly melts the thin glaze of ice. Ted helps me out of the tent and hurries to pack up. Next, he locks one of my arms under his, and we begin to make our way down the mountain, looking not unlike the famous painting of Washington's troops in the snowy woods at Valley Forge. When we get to the cabin, instead of entering, I suggest we head straight to the car, where we can start the engine and quickly heat up the space, instead of going through all the rigmarole of starting a fire in the cabin. Sitting on the soft cushion of the passenger seat in his car, the heat turned up to the max, blowing in our faces, feels like a godsend. I start to laugh and cry at the same time. I'm so happy to be alive. Epilogue. In several episodes of The Compulsive Storyteller, I get myself into deep trouble because I've entered terrain that is totally unfamiliar to me. In Twice Blessed, episode 13, I foolishly ignore the warning signs along the highway in Big Sur to descend a foggy, steep, rubble-strewn incline, sparking a landslide which almost proves fatal. In Dysfunctional Family Fun, episode 35, on my family's ill-fated boat trip to an island in Lake George, we encounter every mishap and disaster known to man. In Salt of the Earth, episode 37, on my honeymoon with my wife, I start speeding around doing loop-de-loops in the smooth, flat white desert of the Bonneville Salt Flats, blithely unaware that in the rainy season, The salt flats have deep water pockets, and one of them almost swallows up our car. In all of these situations, I rush headlong into unknown terrain without consulting an expert, doing any research, or taking a moment to think. Even when accompanied by a pro like Ted, I still found myself somehow getting into a jam. I don't know how to avoid my impulse to charge ahead. Maybe I can meditate more, or find God and pray, or maybe I'll just staple a note to my forehead that says in all caps, "Slow down." Let's see how that goes. Are you ready to tell your own story on The Compulsive Storyteller? We're launching a new segment of guest storytelling, and we want to hear your stories. Email a voice recording to hello@thecompulsivestoryteller.com. I'll play selected stories on upcoming episodes. Try to be as clear as possible in your recording, and we reserve the right to lightly edit them for length and clarity. Leave your name or contact information in your voicemail or email, and let us know if you'd like the story to be anonymous. I can't wait to hear from you. The Compulsive Storyteller is now co-produced by Greg Lefebvre and Fadia Montserrat, who's also arranged the music and created the special effects. Emily Ramon does design, research, editing, and marketing. Peter Kokoma has made our theme music and for many seasons co-produced the show with me. If you enjoyed this week's episode, let us know. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Compulsive Storyteller, and we'd love to hear from you. This podcast is independently produced, so we really appreciate all your help and support. Share the show with your friends, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and please leave a review. You can also check out our website, thecompulsivestoryteller.com, for more information. Thanks for listening, and if you didn't like this one, the next one will be another story. All characters and events portrayed in this podcast are based on my truth, with some names and facts changed for privacy. The conversations and dialogues are based on my best memory, but are not word-for-word recreations.